So, growing up here in America, there was always this concept, and I've heard it from many people, even family members. And it's this concept of competition, really, because it's not really a concept that is for, I don't even know the word, but basically to find the one thing that you're better at than everybody else and only focus on that because that's the one that's going to make you more money. And that's what's going to force you to stand out for the rest of the community. And that's what's going to shine the light on you. I've never been like that, mainly because competition isn't my key. Bringing people together is my key, even if I don't stick around. Because essentially, a foundation that lasts even when I'm gone is a true foundation. Do you see where I'm going with this? So basically, some individuals in life will chase a dream for as long as they believe that it will make them money. Not because it fulfills them, not because it satisfies them, not because it makes the world better, not because their goal is to actually repair community and repair family dynamics, but because they care more about financial gain than they do about sustainability. And this concept is widely used here in the United States, even by people who teach and people who create courses and things like that. And I love it for you guys. I do. I love it for you guys. I think it's great that you guys are obsessed with this dynamic. But you're also the one spewing the most about how we need community and we need this and we need. Yeah, you need it because that's what's paying your bills. The moment it stops paying your bills, will you continue to have that passion for what you're doing? Or is it going to fall apart and you're going to give up on that community? Really ask yourself that. Because essentially, this is why I don't join groups anymore. Because if you want me to pay into your group, if you want me to continue to pay into your group, but you guys have the audacity to never check in until it's convenient for you, is it a community or is it convenience? And it's really a struggle for me to understand how people fall for this. Because essentially, yeah, we do want to be self-sustainable. So donations are needed, especially for groups and gatherings and things like that. However, I've seen more substantial donations come from the heart. It's why religion has been profiting off of people for so long. Because when it comes from the heart, when it truly comes from the heart, people will donate tons of money to these places because it comes from their heart, their belief in whatever it is that they're going to do. However, when you're trying to ingrain it into your community that the only way they can have community is if they're paying into the community, and a lot of these things are like me first and then the next will come later, right? They create a hierarchy, a pyramid scheme, per se. And I love that for you. Again, but does it satisfy you? Does it fulfill you? And if it wasn't making you any money, would you still do it? Because essentially that's where your purpose is. Your purpose isn't where your money is. Your purpose is how you give back to the spaces and places that you're a part of. How do you give back to the lands that you're a part of? But so many of you are so focused on the surface and outer world that you don't even realize that you're destroying the planet with your bullshit. Because instead of helping the community rise, if you truly wanted the betterment of community, you'd offer X amount of classes completely for free for community members who truly cannot pay. Because people always think, well, it's only $35 a month. Bitch, I'm living off of $900 a month. You really think I can pay $35 a month for your classes? You guys are foolish. You're foolish to believe that there's a that there isn't a standard that you should be held up to. And because of this, a lot of people suffer because it's not, I'm using that as an example, but that's exactly how the government has treated us since the beginning of time. And the issue was because they could only give, and I've seen it during a lot of movements have said this. It's like they're baby steps so that there can be a firm foundation. Yes, they're baby steps so that there can be a firm foundation. But when we see things like fascism and dictatorship being birthed right in front of you, and a lot of you are just sitting here and saying, well, the politicians have to do this, and the court needs to do this, and this, and this, and that. Blah, 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 blah. You forget about how much power you have. Because we can't do anything. Like, some of us are not in any way, shape, or form connected to governmental lines or court systems or anything like that. Yes, we have family members that are, but we are not. And me, for one, I don't call on those connections to be able to do the things that I do. On the contrary, I stay far away from them so that they're not spackled by my big mouth, because I'm always going to point out what I see is insane in this fucking planet. Because essentially we're doing the same exact thing and expecting a different fucking result. You want your community to rise, you want your community to do better, then do it yourself. Stop relying on governmental funds. Yes, of course, we want those funds allocated by the federal government so that these programs can stay in play. But look at how they're using that allocation of funds to be able to manipulate and suppress people, to the point where even stores that are trying to offer discounts or free food are now getting emails so that they cease. That's not okay. Because essentially the people are the ones who paid into those funds, and now you guys are allocating them at will. Same thing when there's natural disasters. So many natural disasters that get ignored by the federal government, hoping that people will die, get desperate, and either leave or just stop complaining. And that's what happens. A lot of that money gets unclaimed, and then the federal government does whatever the fuck they want with it, because essentially they don't give a fuck about their people. Essentially, they don't give a fuck about impoverished lands. And I'm not just talking about Mexicans, black people, Asian people. I'm not just talking about us. We're not the only ones being affected. And the fact is that we can be as racist as we want, but white people are affected by this on a daily basis. It's why my family members on that side had to move to California to be able to thrive and survive. It's why people born in places like Ohio or Kansas or things like that really, really struggle. And I'm not talking all parts of those states. I'm saying those states just because I've had friends and family that have lived in some of those states and have truly struggled, and some who have eventually thrived. But not because the government was right there trying to help them do it. Essentially, our government is supposed to be, in a way, it's supposed to be the safety net. It's not supposed to cover it all. By us wanting it to cover it all, because the funds should be there, we ourselves are setting ourselves up for failure. You're setting it. I saw this when I was visiting family in Mexico too. Some of these farming communities were struggling because they weren't giving them the allocation of fertilizers or seed or things like that for the farming communities, because they want you to get a certain type and blah blah blah, blah and so on and so forth. And so they were complaining about it and complaining about the presidential elections and la di da di da. But what were they actually doing? I had a nephew who was making fertilizer and handing it out, possibly even selling some of it so that his family would be okay, or things like that. Why? Because essentially natural fertilizers are healthier for the planet anyways. So he's doing his own part to help his community. We can complain about the government all you want, but are you going to let the government take the little bit that you've gained? Because essentially in this country, you never own your home, you never actually own your land, and you never ever actually own your own life. It's always being ruled by the dynamics of the laws in your state or locality. And essentially, eminent domain will eventually, if it gets to you, it will still fuck you over. And I know it happens in other countries as well, but some communities are still very tight knit enough to still have these fucking farming communities exist. Here in this country, they don't want farming communities to exist. They don't want people to be self sustainable. And I've seen a couple houses where I am now that I'm very proud to see where they're growing. And I've even put some blessings out and things like that because they're growing fruit on the sidewalk. That is one way to ensure that there's less hunger. Everyone can plant one fruit tree in their front yard or even near a sidewalk. Everyone can do that without destroying the sidewalk. That whole destruction of the sidewalk doesn't just happen for random trees. Not all trees destroy sidewalks. And there's plenty of staple crops that can grow. Then you have all of these foolish people that the what are they called? Troopers and things like that when you're out in natural lands that will get upset with you if you bring, for instance, a pumpkin to these natural lands and leave it there for the animals to eat. I got in trouble for that a few months ago. And he's like, well, they wouldn't have this food if you're not bringing it. They don't have this food because you're preventing it. Because essentially, pumpkin seeds help them to get rid of their parasitic infections. It also helps them cleanse their tummies if they're sick and things like that. It's actually a really good thing. However, because you're prohibiting humans from giving them, and it's like, oh, but some humans don't give them healthy food. I get that, but they're still doing that, and the pumpkin helps those animals thrive and survive despite that. And essentially, when humans were allowed to do things like that, pumpkins and other things like squash and corn and things like that grew naturally in lands. Rice grew naturally in some lands. It still does. People still harvest that natural growing crops. We are the ones preventing that from happening. Why? Because you want people to starve. Essentially, they wanted to wipe out any type of food that you can eat other than the stuff people don't know about. Because if you never forage for herbs or other edible plants, you don't know how to identify them. And it's actually pretty dangerous to do that if you don't know how to identify them, because you can't trust things like Google to identify a plant for you. I've demonstrated that many times to friends. I'm like, you cannot trust things like Google to identify these plants, because that's not the goal. They don't want you to be able to identify things easily. That is something that used to be taught from generation to generation that has been lost. It has been lost because of convenience. The convenience of having these grocery stores. But again, if these grocery chains stopped buying from major farming collectives and started buying from social farming collectives and collectives that are actually thinking about their communities and so on, things would be different. If people grew at least one staple crop, like let's say you love eating tomatoes and you grow tomatoes in your front yard, but your neighbor likes eating corn, so your neighbor grows a shit ton of corn, but then your other neighbor really, really loves beans, so they have a lot of beans, you guys can fucking trade. And to get rid of the rodent population and some of the pests in your garden, you can plant a shit ton of garlic and onions, which is known to aid in that growth. And guess what? Now you have onions and garlic. We have allowed ourselves to fall into this thing where, and I know because I'm struggling with it too. I'm too tired to work a full-time job after a couple hours of doing anything. Like, look at my ojeras. The pain is real, but I'm having to live through the pain because of the ignorance of my doctors. I'm having to put my my life in the hands of the government to give me aid and assistance so that I can live. And essentially that aid is very limited. It's what I told them. I was like, I fought my case for so many years that the last thing I said to my lawyers, I'm like, the aid is never going to come. It's just not going to come. I don't believe that it's going to come because it's not a survivable aid. They give you scraps. It's like when I used to get SNAP and I was working, I got less than $50 a month. So I just gave up on trying to get SNAP. Why? Because they want you to be impoverished. They want you to have nothing before they give you help. And essentially, if you want your community to be well, to thrive, the help needs to come before people are starving. It has to come before they are too sick to work. It has to come before they lose their job or have to choose between paying their rent or eating. That aid needs to come. And I had a very interesting conversation with one of my aunts that was showing me a guy that was just a new homeless individual that was living in their town in Mexico. And she's like, I had a conversation with him and he just really doesn't want to do anything because I told him, I'm like, here's some food. And he rejected it and he only wanted money. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I even told him, you're hungry because you want to be hungry. Because there's fruit trees all along the road. You can go and pick the fruit that you want and eat as much fruit as you want. But you want money so you can go buy food when you can just go pick it yourself. You know, you can also get a basket, pick enough fruit to sell here on the sidewalk that you're sitting on all day and sell that fruit and get the money that you're asking for, right? And he responded rudely to her and she's like, I don't understand this mentality of Americans. And I'm like, I don't understand it either, because essentially it's true. A lot of people are starving here in the United States because of that. But however, in other countries, especially farming towns and their surrounding areas, they don't care that people get off on the road to pick a couple fruits. They don't care if you're really, really struggling. If you come with a basket, fill up your basket from that tree and fucking survive off of it. I mean, if everybody was doing it, maybe they would care. However, there is a integrity in the people that you only take what you need. You only take what you need from the plant itself too. You only take what you need for you to thrive. Not more, not less, just what you need. And then that plant produces and produces in accordance to what you need. I even demonstrated with Persephone, the peach tree. The more we gave of her fruit, the more she grew, the better fruit that she gave. Same thing with the wamuchil, the better fruit that they give, and so on, and the more fruit that they give. Why? Because essentially the plants are going based on our energy. Do not take more than you need from the plants. Do not take more than what you need from other individuals in your life or in your communities. But we don't have that mentality here in the US. Parasites sit there charging and charging and charging people and seeing what they can get from other people, including free labor from volunteers and things like that, when in fact they're not actually giving anything back to the community. All they want to do is create a paid community so that they can continue to be making money, because all they care about is the money. Oh, but we have overhead costs and da 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 da. Okay, so do a fundraiser for those overhead costs. Don't drain your own community if you already see that they don't have the funds or the way to give you more. And don't underappreciate prayer, motherfuckers, because essentially that's the reason you have what you have, because some of us are praying for you to succeed, praying for our angels to aid you in what you're doing. But because you guys are so disconnected from the lands, that's what I always tell people. I can grow anything anywhere I go. Anywhere I go, whether I'm out in nature or actually have a garden, I can grow anywhere I go. And it's not because I have a green thumb. It's because I have Mother Nature's heart. We are directly connected. We feel each other on such a deep level. And you can't take that away from me. No matter what you do, you can't take that away from me. And that's why indigenous tribes are constantly being hurt, why they themselves hate themselves for that connection, because it's not appreciated anywhere else. People have wanted me to hate my way of life my entire life. I have fought to remain soft and connected, even throughout treatment, even throughout psychological abuse from my own providers. And I'm not just talking about family providers, I'm talking about my own medical providers trying to convince me that these connections are not only unreal, but they're also magical thinking or somehow a deterrent to life. Why? Because I don't believe in the capitalistic dream. That's not a dream, that's a fucking nightmare. You're always going to need to be taking from someone else to be able to accomplish it. And never will it be self sustainable. Never will it be self sustainable. And until you guys understand that, you're going to keep harming your communities. Which I'm perfectly well aware that for some of you, oh, but this is the school of life. Earth is the best way to elevate yourself because essentially we come here to learn, and without these things we wouldn't. Motherfuckers, there is enough education out there. We need to start repairing shit. Stop making it about people have been in suffrage for centuries because of this bullshit. And it wasn't so wide set before. Before you had to go to a city to suffer like this. Or the city came to you when they ran out of funds of food storage or things like that. The city would come to the farms and steal. Why? Because it's not self-sustainable. Even though many of you could be growing fucking, I see these tall ass buildings here in the city. You guys could be growing tomatoes, and I bet you those motherfucking tomatoes would thrive just because of the ocean breeze. They'd just be growing down those things, and you wouldn't need a huge plant for it to produce a shit ton of tomato. Don't call your laziness self-sustainability, because a city as big as the one I live in now cannot self-sustain itself with what I've seen. You're reliant on those farmers, and then you're mistreating those farmers. That makes no sense to me. Makes zero sense to me. And on top of it, people who are making money undervalue the work of those of us who are actually getting our hands dirty, are actually growing things. Because essentially, the garden I made for my family was supposed to sustain them and sustain through these hard times. They let most of the edible plants die or pulled them out because they had no idea that they have seasons. You murdered them. You let food die because of your laziness, because of your belief that you can't do more. You would have had more energy if you would have just watered those plants. They would have shared their energy with you, and they would have taken some of what you're carrying and they would have processed it and produced more so that you didn't have to work as hard to pay for those things. But essentially, your mentality is disconnected and only focused on making money, and it's not focused on actually helping your communities. It makes me sad because it's not just in my family that I see this, it's everywhere I go. And I don't know how to hold this in my heart anymore. Besides going out into nature and planting more everywhere I go, spreading seeds everywhere I go, especially because rainy season is coming. This is the best time to start spreading seeds so that in the spring we'll have more food. Just growing randomly in the places where I go for walks. Knowing that essentially I can get in trouble for doing these things because I already have gotten in trouble. Because people are ignorant, stupid, disconnected because of what this country made you believe was the American dream. The American dream should involve the land that you're colonizing. The American dream should also include the beings of those lands, not just the humans. Every being has a place, a space, and a purpose. And your purpose is not the one that's making you money. It's the one that's rebuilding your community. And if it happens to make you money, that's just icing on the cake. It's the thing that you would do in spite of whether it makes money for you or not. Some of us are stewards of the land, whether we like it or not. If we disconnect ourselves from that, our body begins to die, literally. But that's what they want. They want us to die, those of us who are that interconnected with the lands, so that you guys can forget about what it means to be interconnected. So keep going. You're doing a great job saying that you don't want what's happening and then allowing it into your life. I love you and have a good day. This is just some food for thought. It is not any form of advice, medical, political, or of any kind. It is just a seed for thought for it to grow. I love you and have a beautiful day.